Hey, folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the human adventure, all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. So happy that you're here and happy that we have Crista Hardin on the show. She is a relationship expert and author, as well as the host of the popular Enneagram and Marriage podcast. We have her on the show today. We talk all things Enneagram and relationships. We dive into a lot of specifics around relationships. You're going to love this podcast. Make sure you check out her Enneagram and Marriage podcast. And then also, if you want to find out more about her, we didn't get to this at the end of the show, but you can go to enneagramandmarriage.com to find out more. And it's her handle also for socials, Enneagram and Marriage. So make sure you check that out. Crista Hardin, so happy that we have her with us. And now, the man of the hour, Ian Cron.
All right, Typology friends, welcome back. Welcome back to this unusual podcast on which we explore what it means to be a human being through the lens of the Enneagram, looking at all things through the lens of the Enneagram. And today we have an amazing guest, as Anthony has already told you. In the house, we have author of the book, The Enneagram in Marriage, Your Guide to Thriving Together in Your Unique Pairing, host of the Enneagram and Marriage podcast, the inimitable, the wonderful, the incredible Crista Hardin. Welcome to Typology.
Woohoo! Thank you so much for that glowing review, you guys. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, Anthony, did you notice, Krista's an Enneagram 7, and she actually called out the code, the international code of all sevens, which is woohoo! Right at the beginning. That was the first words out of her mouth.
And I promised I wouldn't try to contain myself, and I couldn't after you guys did that. So
That is hilarious.
We lit her fuse and off she went.
Forget it. The party's on.
Here she is, ladies and gentlemen, walking confetti cannon, Crista Hardin.
woohoo!
Okay, we have so much to talk about. So, Crista, you're an Enneagram 7. That makes you energetic. It makes you optimistic. It makes you actually wired for connection, but also a loyal and anxious person under the surface. Now, 7s don't typically look anxious. They look very confident, like life is rolling off their back. Tell me about your relationship with anxiety as a member of the fear triad.
Oh my gosh, it's big and it's happening now. I'm just so excited to be here. And that's what we do as 7s is we roll our anxiety into that enthusiasm. We look at the research around that. We think about that neurogenesis and we try to always have good positive strategies. But underneath it all, as you so rightly claimed, there's a lot of anxious energy rolling around. And even below that, when we can finally stop or are forced to stop, there's a lot of sadness even under that. And so when we can hit the emotions, when we can hit the sadness, we find ourselves in a very rare state of calm. And so that's always a beautiful gift to us, but it's hard to get to.
So it's so interesting you mentioned the sadness, because I do think that 7s have very suppressed pools of grief and sadness. Now, let me give you an example of someone from my own life who is a quintessential 7, okay? But they've done some work, and one of the things that's so interesting about them is they have these, obviously, 5E moments, right? Mm-hmm. And in the 5E moments, he tells me, and this happens a lot, he listens to sad soundtracks. So he's a musician and he's into film scoring, but he listens to Ennio Morricone's The Mission soundtrack. These da-va-da-va-da, very sad kinds of melodies and big kind of pastoral British choral pieces, because he loves the kind of melancholy, and they get him in touch with his sadness. Is that a truth for you too?
Yeah, it's well said. And mine was the Cranberries. As soon as I started to discover this deeper side to myself in middle school, I was finally able to get down to the root of it with Dolores. belting out her angst. And I was par for the course, right in time for the grunge era. So I got into all these hardcore, sort of really dark night of the soul musicians. And I was also having an existential faith crisis at the time. And so it all hit at once. And I found that space of sadness, and it was very therapeutic. But having the 7 qualities too, I would rise up and do the tennis team, do the student council, everything high up as well. So there were these 2 poles, as I know you understand, with the 7 going from 7 to 1 a lot. And we're going to talk about some other things with subtype, I know as well. But yeah, I can really resonate with that just deep desire to find a place of safety. And music gives us a container to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I'm trying to imagine you listening to Kurt Cobain and Nirvana and Eddie Vedder and Pearl Jam and et cetera, in the 1990s. Were you skateboarding too? I just want to know, Christa, were you a skateboarder?
No, I was a thrift store coffee shop.
That's great.
Wow. I don't know. Sometimes I think you sound like a self-pressed 4, but we'll talk about that. All right. So how does your type show up in your marriage?
Well, I have really met my husband through the sense of me having a lot of the fun qualities. And my husband, we met very young, and he needed a lot of fun in his life. He was just so serious, so all-American football player, Bible boy, who just was going to church every Sunday morning and night and Wednesday. And he met me, and immediately I could see we're not the fit. Here I am in my complete grunge era. Even hearing his name, I said, that is not a guy I want to meet. And it was so interesting how in that one space, he must have known, how ones know a lot, gut instinct. Yep. I need some of that fun in my life. So he chased me down in many different ways. And then he ended up getting a hold of me, thankfully. And he got me in the heart space, which is always hard to wrestle me into. And we were at a Denny's after a movie, a Pauly Shore movie in high school. And he's like, do you want to have a piece of pie at the movies? And I was thinking, sure. Yeah, let's do that. Instead of me going and partying with my friends, let's have a piece of pie. This is so odd. And we did. And in that time, he cared so deeply about me that I had never been cared about like that, especially on a first date. And it really impressed me that this person I was meeting could see me more than just this fun girl who maybe wasn't very smart or was a partier, who was an athlete, but who actually cared. And from there, it just blew up, and he would yell at me and a friend, like to our algebra trig teacher, and say, like, get her focusing because she's got to learn for the future. And I'd be like, what are you doing? But it really evolved. And then, then I started to beat him in grades in college and grad school. So it was just fun to see how we could help each other.
I love that. So he's a 1, you're a 7. Yeah. When you're not doing well, you start to look like an unhealthy version of him. And when he's doing great, he starts to look like a healthy version of you. Do you often watch each other, passing each other and going in opposite directions on the highway of life?
Absolutely. And he will see me head into that 5 space or the 4 space. And he isn't as comfortable at all in those spaces, because not only is he a 1, but he's a social 1. So he's most comfortable achieving and performing. And he just did this huge thing at our church on Easter, this narration he did for, 5 minutes memorized. And he just loves quick things. He's a doer, as many ones are. And so when I start to get sober and quiet, that's really scary for him. So not only have we processed our glow up, but also our shadows together, because we can see that sometimes when I get healthier, that's really scary for him. And then when he gets into his 7, sometimes I want him to go to that 5 space and say, I do say to him often, you're so intelligent. You have a master's in theology from Wheaton College. You have, you're a PA as well. You've been through medical school. Why are we talking about Dude Perfect? And he's like, because I need some fun in my life. Remember, I go to 7 in health. And I'm like, okay, taking a deep breath. We can do this. So that's sort of our rub.
We're going to talk, you just referenced glow, and we're going to talk about Enneagram glow a little bit later on in the show, because I know that that's a little something from your book, The Enneagram in Marriage, Your Guide to Thriving Together and Your Unique Pairing. And so we're going to circle back. So here's a question. Are you in therapy right now?
No.
Okay. So what are you working on personally right now in your own life toward the end of becoming a more integrated whole person?
One of the things I'm working on is my workbook here. The
Oh,
Fix.
no.
Yes.
Woo, look at that.
Oh,
When
my
you were
gosh.
on my podcast, you told me about this little ditty. So I had to get the amazing workbook. So I do this in the mornings or when I'm triggered. I also take time.
Tell the people what you
every
just held up. Sorry.
I held up Ian's The Fix workbook, which is amazing, you guys, seriously, and help somebody like me to write in it and talk about my gluttony and write in. I just was flipping through it and I can't even read what I wrote on some of the pages. But basically, I take every time in the morning to emotionally process because emotions are so hard for me to dig down into. And so I have to. I've lost both parents at this point. I've had marriage griefs. We've been together almost 30 years. I have to do my work every morning. And that brings me to a healthier place. I didn't say healthy because sometimes I still mess up through the day, but it really helps me to get grounded, even just for a few minutes. Probably don't get as deep as some people, but sometimes I do therapy at different points. Right now I'm not in, but it's an uncomfortable space for sevens, as you know.
Yeah. So you referenced 30 years of marriage. So do you as a 7 ever get, this got to be honest now, do you ever get bored with the daily routine or maintenance of a long-term relationship?
Yeah, I really do. I had my husband, we've been 30 years together, almost 25 married, but I had him go to the I Still Do conference for family life at 1 year into marriage. And we still joke about that because he's like, of course we still do. It's been a year. And I'm like, that's really hard for some of us. And so we have, tarried through. His mercies are new every morning. But we really each have our irritations because he's a 1-2 and he's like, oh my gosh, of course that's his glow off. He's like, I'm with a 7 who, doesn't do things as neatly and organized. So I think we've both had pause moments where we're like, what happened? And then we've come to talk at length about it through our own marriage therapy together, our own therapies apart. And we've just found that it's a progress sort of thing. And I try to come from that authentic space with all of my clients and podcasts. Just, this is a journey. It's difficult. I was telling a client that this morning who said, do you think I should divorce? And I actually said, I'm a 7 who's been married for almost 25 years. I understand it's tough, but I think it's been a wonderful, worthy journey.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. I'm so glad to hear you say that. And I know that there are circumstances in which, in my work as a therapist, as a one-time, parish priest, I mean, I know that there are times when divorce or staying together, right, where you're like, I'm having to choose here between 2 bad alternatives. Which is the best, worst alternative?
Yeah.
Choose to lose, as my friend Dan Allender says. Figure out how you got to choose to lose, right? So, and I have on a rare occasion said to somebody, I think leaving is best. We've done everything. Yeah. And oftentimes there's another pathology present.
Yes,
there may be a personality disorder, or somebody is violent. In which case, I always am like, get out fast. At least physically, get out fast till we can do something else. But I've been married almost 40 years, and I can say that there were large chunks of time when we were on the rocks. I mean, having a hard time. Yeah. I'm a 4. My wife is a 9. Yeah. My wife herself would say, it took me a while to wake up. And so here I am looking for passion and juice and energy and depth and connection. And sometimes she would just look at me like, I have no idea this language you're talking about. And there were years of loneliness and misunderstandings. I am so glad we stuck it out. Yes. Because in the last 5 years, especially, I'd say, we have experienced this kind of, I don't want to say arrival, but kind of getting someplace where there's a peaceful, I'd hate to quote the Eagles, a peaceful, easy feeling, Anthony, where there's just a kind of comfort and understanding and settledness. But it took 35 years to really get to that place. I'm not saying it was all bad leading up. I'm just saying we went through swaths of time where things were difficult, So that's an encouragement to people listening, sometimes it's so easy to say I'm out of here. But understand, I've never met someone who said that divorce was easier than they thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Usually they talk about, because all my siblings are divorced, as are all my husband's siblings. And they just, my sister, who's the 3, she recently said to me, divorce is hell. And she's
Yeah.
divorced and she's, doing a great thing and her life is beautiful. But it was just a passing remark. And those things I take very seriously because of the field I work in, because of my own marriage. It's helpful to ponder that.
Well, and yet there are times when it's inescapable, right? Like it's just inescapable. You're choosing the best worst of two worst options. You know?
Yeah. She wasn't saying let's go backwards, but it's its own hell at times. So I like how you are not painting an idealistic picture of marriage or divorce.
Yeah, no, neither one. All right, let's jump into the book, right? The Enneagram in Marriage. And of course, you're the host of this remarkable podcast. You work with couples, every walk of life, all kinds of combinations. What's like the big aha moment that couples typically have when they start exploring their Enneagram types? Like, is there one?
Usually it's and this may sound a bit pedestrian to you as a 4, but it's usually this point where they go, oh my gosh, we're not the only crazy ones, or just, we're not alone. Like everyone walks through shadows. I thought that was just us, that we lost our glow, that we passed through that stage of limerence and now we're feeling frustrated and getting angry. And so that's always so welcome for them to hear, because I always think, and you probably do too a bit, like everyone knows that, but they don't, because they don't share about their marriages everywhere. And we have fewer and fewer connections these days that are not just the Instagram types of quick DMs. And so just hearing that is so holy and hopeful for them.
Now, I have a question that I have an answer for, but I want to see if your answer is the same as my answer.
Yes.
All right. Is there a combination of 2 types that for some reason you run into more than you do any other pairing? Like it's just really common.
Yeah. I have that pair is an 8-9 for me.
Okay.
Interesting.
That is interesting and understandable. I've met a lot of 8-9s. For me, it's 9 and 1.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. Well, I do sell the most glow guides of 9 and 1, followed by 9 and 8.
Wow.
No way.
Yes. But I've kind of thought this out as maybe the 9s and 1s naturally do a bit better. Not that I don't see them occasionally in therapy or coaching, but I think 9 and 8 have a lot of work to do and can do a lot of work. But I think a lot of 9s and 1s, just in terms of some of the places they meet on the fun level, especially, they get by without as much therapy.
Is there a pairing that tends to be like more challenging, but also more transformative?
Yeah, I think that 3 and 8 together have that quality, but 1 with any type is more transformative, because when ones start to soften, I mean, I said 3 and 8 for those who are listening to remind everyone, these 2 big, powerful personalities. It's amazing to see the joy that can come forth of getting in line and learning how to work together. Of course, it's never perfect, but a 1 with any type, 1s usually have such a reactive formation quality, coming in with such a sense of like, I'm not mad. And when we do discover that they're mad, we discover that, they've had a lot of judgments about their partner, about themselves. The inner critic's really loud. So the changes you get to see are just glorious, because yes, they're still going to get mad sometimes, but now they understand their spouse isn't a villain and that they're not a villain. And so it's really special.
It's so interesting. We've had a number. I do a lot of work with internal family systems. I know you are familiar with internal family systems. And one of the ways I have used the Enneagram with internal family systems is explaining to people that we contain all 9 types. And oftentimes our parts are these types, right? So all of us got an improver in there. All of us got a investigator in there. All of us have an achiever in there. And some may be louder than others or more active than others, depending on the person. And I find that so helpful with 1s, because what I can tell them is, look, for example, this inner critic in you, which is what they're always asking, right? How do I get rid of the inner critic? And I'm like, you're not going to get rid of the inner critic. What you're going to do is recognize that it's a good part kind of stuck in a bad role. And what it really needs is a seat at the table where they feel welcomed and loved, and where you understand that they have good intentions, but they don't know that their way of trying to help you is actually hurting you. And they just, because it's usually a very young part in them.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't know,
Yeah.
doesn't know. Are you working a little bit with IFS and the Enneagram?
I do. I haven't been this past month. I went through a series on it with my membership group. I use it internally at different moments. Right now, I've just been doing more emotional regulation work with people because I feel like everybody's been in a really angsty 8 space lately. I've been having a lot of 8 clients. They're not 8s. They have an 8 big part of them. So in that regard, yes. But otherwise, I'm just really trying to connect on a heart level with my clients lately. And that's not always easy for me, of course, but I was taught a lot of 2s went to grad school with me, and that was a really big learning curve for me. I got involved in emotionally focused therapy for my thesis and kind of learned quickly, like cognitive behavioral therapy was very easy for me. I got 0 points wrong. McMinn, who was my professor, he wrote some psychology books. He's like, you've got this. There's no fixing here. But EFT and dissolving my own shame a little bit and doing some of this heart work was and has been the most important journey for me and my clients, because I was just telling somebody today, like they said, I've been learning from my life coach that we don't have to be affected by each other, and we can just be happy on our own. And I was just able to say, you know what? Like, I love that. I get that as a 7, but the truth is we do co-regulate each other and we can't leave our attachments. So I also want to invite us both into that space. And that's a lot harder for me because, as you can imagine, what I said with my marriage story, even just that alone, much less 3 kids that are busy and need a lot of attention from me after I'm done with my sessions, is like, okay, I have given something now that's very costly for me to give. And now I have to wrap up and go be with, family who's not able to process that as easily. So that's why I need that emotional time in the morning. Sometimes I need it later in the day before I wrap up work. But I'm learning not to run from my clients in that way. And that's the work I've been doing, is staying with them. And that's probably been the work I've been doing with them for 20 years, is like letting them affect me and letting them take from me, which is hard.
Wow. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
Did you know that 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental health illness each year? That means, whether you know it or not, you likely have a family member, a neighbor, coworker, or child struggling with mental health right now. Or maybe it's you. But the stigma around mental health prevents many from seeking help. With May being Mental Health Awareness Month, I want to encourage all of our listeners to take care of their well-being. A great place to start is to find a good therapist who can listen without judgment and teach new coping skills to help address things like depression, anxiety, addiction, and relationship conflicts. BetterHelp makes it easy to find someone to talk to. With over 10 years of experience matching people with the right therapist, BetterHelp has helped over 5 million people get the help they need. And with their fully online program, BetterHelp not only makes therapy more affordable, but more convenient as well. You can join a session with the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. We are all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/Typology podcast today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Typology podcast. So you just said something that really triggers something for me.
Yeah.
I never talk about politics on this show. Okay. I don't talk about it on Instagram. I mean, someone once trolled me and said, as a leader in our faith-based space, why aren't you commenting on blank? And I'm like, I'm an Enneagram teacher. Like, I'm not a political commentator. Like, why do you think I should be doing that? Like, and who would care that what I had to say about X, Anyway, the point is, it's interesting. We have an administration right now that has a lot of 8 energy. That is not a critique. It is not. It is not praising it. It is not denigrating it. It is just saying it is what it is. Right?
Yeah,
Like it has a lot of 8 energy, and it causes a lot of emotional dysregulation in the broader population.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like
Wow.
it's just interesting to watch. Like the ones in my life who have strong opinions, they get activated because there's a flood of news coming all the time.
Yes.
So they're just hearing like minute by minute, what's he said now? What's he doing now? You know what I mean? It's like constant barrage, and people get triggered. And it's so interesting how different types respond to the trigger.
Yes, it is. I've already had it in 2 sessions today where they were opposite ends reacting to that. Politically, can you believe it? And of course, you as the helper are also in that same position as you're at, just trying to help guide them and facilitate them and learn from what they're talking about versus, that. But I was analyzing an 8-9 today and saying, look at how the 9 processed differently. The 9 was taking in all the news, which we'd always think 9s don't, but they're taking it all in, and then they want to peacemake. But the other types are just grabbing a hold sometimes. Oh, I saw a headline and now I'm incensed. And the 9's like, I've been thinking about it all along. So I try to, not move my sessions too much in that direction, but now you're helping me to understand why I'm seeing all this 8 energy.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's just a wash in the culture. It's just a wash in our culture. All right. Now back to marriage.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the book here, right? So, when, someone comes to you and says, as they almost always do at my workshops, right? They'll say, are there 2 types that are really most compatible? Now, how does the Enneagram reframe that question for you?
I think that my typical answer has always been all the types have their gorgeous glow and the way they shine together, and they all have their pitfalls and their shadows. But I have seen some of the types have an easier bond, especially after they've done their work. Because I'm going to tell you guys a couple pairing that I'm going to say this about, but let me caveat it that the couple I was working with doing one of my intensives had been together for over 40 years. So I was reflecting with them at the end of our intensive, I've just loved this work. I've always seen your pairs together have a lot of great gifts, but I also work in the space of people having infidelity. So sometimes I'll have somebody having an affair with that type. And I don't want to say this is a great type to work with. There are complex reasons why we do and don't talk about pairings with such alacrity. But I guess I just want to name that this couple really helped me to see why they were doing so well. And it's a 2 and a 3. And they said, it's because we didn't get here for 20 years. So back to your earlier comment, I just said, excuse me, because I was like, I love your pairing. I was starting to idealize. I just love it, gushing. And then they go, yeah, it took us a little while. It took us about 20 years before we started to do that work. And it just really spoke to me like, okay, I know why I love your pairing because you've worked at it. It's beautiful after all these years. So let me say that and say each pairing does have its own hue. That's gorgeous. But of course, we know 2s and 3s, they can flatter one another. They can understand the deep desire for attention and really from an internal place versus fighting that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. My typical answer is, look, any 2 types can do really well to the degree that they have done their work. If only one has done work and the other refuses, then the distance between the 2 of them will grow greater, and sometimes to the point of breaking. You've seen that one person's gone on a great journey of growth, or there's been a switch in the script where the 9, for example, wakes up and goes, I have a voice and I have a place in the world, and the other one's going, this is a new script. Like, where did this come from? Like, this is not, as Talking Heads said, Anthony, this is not my wonderful wife. It's like, this is, once in a lifetime, it's just like, they're just like completely flipped out. Right. Now, the only type, and I was taught this, and I think there's some truth in it. The only 2 that can, the type that tends, I may ask you and I'll give you my thought. Is there a type combination that you see is particularly challenging?
Yes, 1 and 8.
Tell me more.
There's so much desire for autonomy and control with each of those types, one more overt, of course, but they get in each other's spaces. They help each other out. They want to do their own thing a lot of the time, and they have their own particular ways of doing it. And there's so much passionate energy there and so much rightness personified that each of them can get very upset. And then the 8 feels like, I'm pulling back. I'm going to tell somebody else about it. I'm going to pull back with you, but then go reactive elsewhere. And then the 1 is just seething, and they're doing their work in their, just goodness and rightness, but it's coming out sideways. So that's what I tend to see. Their conscientiousness is showing up, but it's showing up in a hard way. Do you notice that?
I do. And it's particularly if it's a 1-to-1.
Oh, yes. Oh my God.
Because then they become jealous of any outside interest that the 8 has. Yes. If the 8 pulls away and goes harder at work, harder with golf, harder with something else, they get jealous, right? And then that can add a whole different kind of energy into the equation. The other difficulty with that 8-1 combination can be that they're both dualistic thinkers. They're both black and white thinkers. Yes. And so that can become a place where they can get intractable and stuck. Like if you're a black and white thinker, your way is pretty clear. And if they're not on the same page, there can be a control and a power struggle can break out there. I think the other combination that I've historically thought was difficult was 2-4s.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense. I don't see that very much, but yes, I really do see why you're saying that.
Yes, particularly 2 social 4s. I think a self-present, a social 4 would have a little bit better shot, but the 2 4s who are social 4s, because they're looking for someone else to complete them. And they idealize and romanticize the other. And then in the beginning, I always laugh and say, it's 6 weeks of great sex followed by 35 years of existential hell. Because it's a lot of passion on the front end.
Yeah.
I have found the ideal other, right? Yes. And then they discover that the other one isn't ideal, and they both have a missing piece thing. So they're both going, will you complete me? And the other one's going, how can I complete you? You're supposed to complete me. And then they just start running around in a circle, feeling disappointed in each other and focused on what's missing in the other. Yeah. And then, but when they do their work, it can work. And I've seen 2 4s work, 2 social 4s work, but it does seem to take extra effort.
That's such a good insight. And you're helping me to understand the other one is the 2-4 dynamic that I see that in, and the trauma bonding. And you almost want to help them and say, if you're that bad off, like you said, these are the cases where you don't want to see abuse and codependency continuing on in terrible ways. And so it's those couples where you're like, please take care of you. You're worthy. God loves you as well. And you don't have to follow this loop. But it's interesting that you say that. And of course, to every listener, I've done some beautiful viewing of 1s and 8s, 2s, 4s, 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 as you said, the same, who do the work and are beautifully healed. And some of my 1-8s are my champion couples who have volunteered in their rightness. Christa, can we be your model couple? And come back to me once for an anniversary and said, we just want to celebrate Valentine's Day with you because, we're doing so well. So it's these couples that I think struggle the most often have the biggest, grandest stories as well.
I was going to say, have you found a particular shift that helps couples move from fixing to understanding each other?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think that when I'm with a couple and they start to learn about the fundamental attribution error and really learn it on a deep dive level.
Okay, you're going to have to.
Yeah.
So I know what a fundamental attribution error is, but I think you need to explain it because it's actually a very powerful concept.
Yeah. So this concept that we are also flawed like our partner, but even deeper, usually we come at life with, when I'm upset, it's because I'm tired or I have a certain trauma trigger. When my spouse is upset, it's because they're intrinsically bad or wrong. And so we make this fundamental error about how we're better and they're worse. And we all do it. And that's one of, I think most of us here listening or on air, it's our waking up moment in our relationships. Oh my gosh, me too. I'm also at fault. So when they really, really get that it's powerful. And I have some couples right there right now who have learned it, and they're like thinking about leaving an affair, and they're like, this is tough because now I get, or thinking of divorcing, now I get it. And so we're just sitting in that tension, and that's not easy, but it's worthy to do that.
So I'm going to give you a mantra that so helped me. It's not original to me. It's actually original to my 12-step sponsor. And it's about, he doesn't know anything about fundamental attribution errors, but this is exactly what he said. So I'll have an interaction with somebody and I will be pissed. Okay. And I will call him on the phone and I'm going, I am really pissed because I had this conversation and they said this and they said that. And he'll go, he's very Tennessee. And he'll go, Ian, you need to give up the old idea that you know what just happened.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, what? The first time he said it, I almost fell over. I'm like, I've been to seminary and grad school twice. I have multiple advanced degrees, and I have never heard someone so concisely say what I have always needed to hear when I get reactive. You need to give up the old idea that you know what just happened. And in marriage,
so good.
That is so important because, if Annie comes in and she's upset about, she was upset about something yesterday. I will not go into detail, but I can tell you that we had a very long walk. And during that walk, she was reading into a friendship something that I was like, I think there was an attribution error there. Like she was thinking that this person, she had created a narrative about this other person. I didn't think it was necessarily true, but she was convinced, right? Because she was convinced it was true.
Yeah.
And I kind of said to her, you might want to just give up the old idea that you know what just happened in that conversation. Because there's a story behind the story you're telling yourself that's probably more accurate.
And that's so good. The Appalachian sage did it again.
Oh, you have no idea how many things like that I have from his lips. You have no idea.
So unfair. I love it.
Oh man, he's like folk psychologist. He just is like one thing after another. 40 years of sobriety will give you quite a bit of wisdom, I guess. And the guy needs to put it in a book. I've told him I'll write it for him, but he's amazing that way.
Yeah.
As you know, I believe the Enneagram is one of the most powerful tools for developing self-awareness. But to gain the benefits, you need to know your type. Taking an Enneagram assessment is the first step toward understanding yourself and the people around you. It offers insights that can enhance your self-awareness, personal growth, emotional intelligence, your relationships. It's not just a one-time test. It's a lifelong tool that will help you navigate life with more clarity, purpose, and empathy. And now, when you take my brand new Typology Institute Enneagram assessment, you'll receive a research-backed, scientifically evidenced, comprehensive report that's easy to understand. Not only will you learn your dominant Enneagram type, but you'll gain insight into aspects of the Enneagram most other assessments don't cover, such as your dominant wing, your subtype, orientation to time, and even stances. Get your results today at typologyinstitute.com/assessment. Enter the discount code Typology Podcast on the checkout page to get 10% off your assessment. Again, that's typologyinstitute.com/assessment and enter Typology Podcast for 10% off. All right, let's talk about the Enneagram Glow. You've said it, you mentioned glow a bunch of times. People are going, what's the Enneagram Glow?
Yes, it's a concept that when we're married, as we walk through life stages, we don't just stop once we find connection and the sexual instinct together. We actually, when we're doing good psychological work, will approach Erik Erikson's stage of generativity versus stagnation, and we'll start to help people with our lights that we're each shining. And so my husband uses an illustration when we're teaching together of two candles, and you can see that they actually have a new color around them when you put those two different colored candles together. And he's a chemistry teacher of the past also, but he just loves that. And he actually termed that on one of our walks one time when I said, I'm having all these 2-5 couples, and then I'll see all these others. and they have this similar hue to them, but it's not how they used to look if it was just like a single 2 or a single 5.
Right.
And now the 2 is more muted and okay with introverting and has understood that they aren't rejected by pulling back.
Right.
And the 5's now understanding that they can help in their own ways, even if they are introverted.
Right.
And all of that to say that it just reminded us of the shared light that we shine out in the world with our collective gifts. And the city on the hill, for those who have a biblical paradigm as we do, is a great concept to say, let's not hide our lights, but let's not shine everything just parallel. Let's find projects that we can do together. And I even helped a couple with that today who was thinking of separating. And we just agreed together as we were holding that space of, we don't know if you're going to get together, but if you do, we're going to need to find something for the 2 of you to make some meaning together. So the glow is all about making that shared meaning, sharing that light, but also being comfortable with knowing we're still individuals and we still have some shadows with that glow, right? It's not all these beautiful, whimsical moments. It's also, we cast a particular shade together as well. Like that 2-5 we mentioned, they cast a very large rejection shadow of worrying about rejection and being the first to withdraw. So each of us also has to know what that looks like.
I love that concept that every type combination throws off a different hue or color than as on the basis of their interdependence, hopefully, that the sum of the parts has its own kind of character and flavor or appearance. And I think that's a really, really powerful kind of idea. I'm thinking about my own marriage, a 4 and a 9. And as an older guy now, I'm not as emotionally labile as I used to be as a younger man. Like I was really up and down, up and down, up and down. And Annie's very steady, right? And I'm going to now have to think about what is that hue and that when we're both healthy in our space and with shared mission, that we radiate,
Yes.
I love that. Well, I'm a 4. I love metaphors. You just gave me a new metaphor to play with, so that's good.
Gosh. And it might even be something to do with thoughtfulness, because when I see 4s and 9s together, they just make such room for each other and each other's gifts when they're healthy, and in a way that most can't do with them. And it's just really beautiful to see that. And then they become very thoughtful about others. Now, sometimes with my own experience with 4s and 9s, I have some in my home that are best friends, and they just are just my 2 daughters, and they're going to college together now, but they are just like, we also get really wounded and hurt when we're so considerate and people forget us. So sometimes that's a light they have to walk through together. And I've taught them, like, you 2 are some of the most considerate people in the world. And when people forget you, I know that must ache, but we do need to look at the Enneagram and what's going on for each of them. So it's, been important to do some of that work, but that's something you might take home and think about.
So let's talk about conflict for a second. Obviously we know that navigating conflict is just an absolute bare necessity in relationships. So how can understanding your partner's core fear help you change the way you fight, if you will, or repair after the fact?
There's a couple different ways I try to go about this. And one of them is through the instincts, but that's going to be more big picture, just an understanding in general. We have different priorities about what we do to survive. And it's very hindbrained. And so some of that is workable. Some of it isn't. We just have to allow for some sort of compromise. When I'm trying to really dig in with compassion and even problem solving, I often work from a triad center of intelligence point of view, because often people forget that heart types 2, 3, and 4 really and truly need attention. And they forget that 5, 6, and 7 desperately need safety, and that 8s, 9s, and 1s are extremely sensitive if you try to break their sense of accuracy or tell them they're wrong. And these can be so foundational for people and exactly how we fight when we're not doing it well. And when we know this, we're able to say, my husband can say, the most important thing that I want to tell you is I do want you to feel safe. And that really helps me, because one time he was pushing so hard for rightness that I felt so backed in a corner. And I can just picture where we were standing by his closet. And I was like, I don't feel safe. Like, I've set up a boundary and this is where it lands.
Right.
And it's like that safety versus rightness, or whatever your issues are, you got to, for us, we need to come into the heart space. So learning what are the two places where we don't land, what is the missing piece here of that third triad, can help sometimes to resolve that. And we do other things as well, the conflict groups in the Enneagram as well. But that heart, mind, body place is a great starting point.
I love that. I think another way of thinking about it is a little bit, and there's some limitations to it, but I would say the stances can be helpful.
Oh, yeah.
So 4s, 5s, and 9s in that withdrawing stance. So when they're faced with conflict, they tend to withdraw into themselves to find the resources to solve what's going on or to get what they want. Whereas the aggressives are moving against energy, oppositional energy, right? So, I always laugh when, you have a 4 and a 9 in a relationship. We're in the withdrawing stance. So when problems come up, it's like we got to be beaten we have to be beaten into dealing with them. It's like, because we'll just typically withdraw, right? We move away.
Yeah.
Whereas people that are in the dependent stance, they, will tend to move towards people, but not against, right? So it's different, not moving against versus moving towards, moving versus moving away. And if I know, for example, if you have a 1 and a 9, that 9 is going to withdraw and that 1 is going to move toward. Now, if they were a 9 and an 8, as you were mentioning, the 8 is going to move against, and the 9 is going to run to the basement. And then the 8 is going to chase them into the basement to solve the problem. And the 9 is going to run upstairs and hide in the bathroom. And you know what I mean? It's just...
Exactly.
And sometimes just that little knowledge when a couple knows that, okay, we're in conflict. This person's starting to withdraw. The more they withdraw, the more I'm moving against.
Yeah.
Right. It just gets everybody to kind of go, to get the withdrawing person to go, okay, I'm staying here for this. I'm here for this. And the 8 to go, back it down, back this down, because I'm coming out too aggressively. And I'm going to chase the 9 away. Right?
Yes.
And all that. So I think stances are helpful. The only problem with stances, and we're going to talk about instincts and subtypes for a second, because while you're here, why not? Yeah. The only problem with stances is subtypes. So you can't just say 4s, 5s, and 9s are all withdrawing, because actually within the subtypes, you could go in a different direction. Like 4s are not, self-preservation 4s are not as withdrawing as social 4s.
Yeah.
Right. And 1-to-1 4s can be very 8ish, can be very aggressive.
Yes.
So sometimes I think you can say in general, in a very blurry kind of general way, stances are useful.
Yes. I would agree.
But when you start to get into subtypes, that theory of stances starts to kind of like fall apart a little bit.
Yeah. I never thought about that.
Because it doesn't bake into the calculations all the different subtypes.
Yeah, I never thought about that with stances, but you're right. It falls short, but it's a good primer for some of what's happening with us.
Absolutely.
Because I can see it, like you're saying, with the clients or with my own marriage. I can see it when I'm like, Wes, I call the dependent stance, I often think of them as culturally compliant stance. And so when I see him being more culturally compliant than compliant to our marriage, it freaks me out a little bit. Or, when he sees me getting aggressive, assertive, in our last month, him and I have a monthly meeting. We always meet where we are quiet and peaceful. And then we affirm one another for a few minutes, which he loves the attaboy so much. That's harder for me with emotions. But then we get to problem solve, which I like, for a few minutes. And during that time, the last time he said to me, can you be a little less reactive when you're afraid? And that was really good. And I said, yes, I'll try to breathe and pause and so he has things with me too, but that's to speaking to stances, like that was a helpful time we could use it in our marriage.
Yeah. So one of this is funny. I've taught the Enneagram, I've taught subtypes, I've taught, stances, I've taught orientations to time, which is also very helpful in marriages. Yeah. one of the areas that I love teaching is instincts. I love teaching instincts. And so for people who are unfamiliar with instincts, it's very difficult. We teach instincts because they're at the core of the teaching around subtypes. And we have 3 basic survival instincts. I won't go into in depth. I will not teach it now. But, one is for self-preservation. One is a drive around social interaction. The other one is more around one-to-one interactions. And in each, it's an instinct, like where do we think we're going to find what we need in order to survive? So self-preservation people are very concerned about bodily survival. Social types tend to be more concerned about where they are in the herd, about being of value to the group because the group represents the keys to their security and safety and their survival. And one-to-ones tend to look more toward individual or intimate relationships, either partnerships or friendships, that they see as holding the key to their survival. Right. And so what do you use instincts in your work?
Yes, that's a really important place for my work. And I often liken it to the same importance as type because I find a lot of infidelity is through the instincts. I find that a lot of conflict is through the instincts. So like I said, it's not always the only layer, but it's often the biggest layer. And it's so hindbrain from what we understand about instincts that we also need to approach it with spirituality. And so my type 4 daughter, she drew this beautiful tree as I was thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And we thought about the roots being our morals, our faith, our shared vision for our mission in life or our individual missions. And then going up that trunk of taking care of our own needs and then branching out a little bit with the sexual and then what's the fruit socially. And it almost fits Maslow or Erickson in terms of hierarchy and how we want to have all 3, right? We want to move up with grace. And so I try to help couples to see that as well as their shadows together and also the pain that's wrapped up in not knowing that your partner has an instinct that's different from yours. It's really a place of pain for people. And sometimes the instincts shift and change, as we know, over the years, because some huge thing will happen. It's not going to happen a lot, but I see that, and that brings hope to couples when they say, I can't do it anymore. They're this instinct. And then the other one has a wake-up call moment and says, hang on a second, I'm fighting for my life. I'm in the sexual instinct with you now, or whatever. And so we're going to, I know after the dust settles, by the way, with those couples, they're still going to land back at their favorite space. But it's a monumental moment that means something, and I don't want to take away from that. So I know that gets a bit complex, but I love this topic. So I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah,
I always tell people, maybe you're a social, maybe you're a one-to-one, but if someone pulls a gun on you, you're suddenly self-preservation. Trust me. Instincts are not fixed. You have all 3 instincts.
That's a good way of saying it.
All right, so this is where I've seen it. I have a friend of mine who is a self-pres dominant instinct, okay? And his partner is he's social, and his partner is one-to-one. And this caused a lot of problems because he identifies with the group as being the source of his safety and security, and where, his survival is tied to where he is in the group. So he was much more of a group guy. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. She was one-to-one, and she saw him as being the key to her survival, not the group. Mm-hmm. Now, what that means is that she always wanted to stay home and watch TV and talk about their relationship. And he always wanted to go out and play pickleball with people and be in the group. Mm-hmm. And she'd be like, you don't want to spend time with me. You don't love me. And he was always saying, you're a wet blanket. You never want to do anything with people. You're too enmeshed with me. And so they took the Typology Institute Enneagram assessment, my new assessment, and they both had this big wake up because it was like, oh my gosh, this is an instinct problem.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you have a test that covers that accurately. And that is so exciting for people listening, because this is such a key place for relationship shadows that you're not even aware of. You might have been doing your type work for a long time. And now hearing these spaces, they matter so much, and you do them so instinctively that you don't even realize sometimes the wrestling is not just with type, but it's here. And here's the good news for people, that when you explain this as a low-hanging fruit concept, almost in a couple of ways, it's neat because there's only 3 to remember versus 9. Yep. And we all know, my husband sometimes says to me, I know you like your Enneagram work, but you're a bit elitist in that. And so I think the instincts are I think Enneagram is reachable for everybody, but I also think, and I can always learn how to do a better job of clarifying, but the 3 is helpful, just self-pres, sexual, social. Which one are you? Which one is your partner? Which one is your shadow?
Yeah, that's the cool thing, right? You can learn about instincts completely separate from the Enneagram.
Exactly.
And it's incredibly helpful. Now, so for people listening who are confused, let me just say this for purposes of education. The reason we're talking about instincts is because when your dominant instinct, the one you camp out in more than in the other 2, comes together with your type's passion, it creates 3 variants. They're called subtypes. And you are, based on your dominant instinct, one of those subtypes. That's how we come up with subtypes. So that's the relevance of instincts in the conversation around the Enneagram. And of course, as I tell people, look, you could just go read the road back to you, and you can just find out your type and maybe your wing, and that'll be helpful. That's a good, and if that's where you want to stop, okay, fine. You've learned something, and that's better than nothing. But if you want to go further down the wormhole, there are all these other juicy things down there, like subtypes and instincts, and you were mentioning earlier tri-types before we got on. There's all kinds of other little nuggets of gold floating around out there that are of use to us that, if you want to go further down, there's more to be gotten. So you've got this wonderful book, The Enneagram in Marriage, wonderful podcast. But what I want to know is, like, what's one, I know this is going to be hard. This is one of those questions I hate when people ask me on a podcast. But like, what's one word of encouragement that you have for any couple, regardless of whether or not they're struggling or getting along? What's one word of wisdom, maybe that's a better way to say it, that you would offer to every couple that you almost always catch yourself sharing with couples in your work?
Well, I am a self-pres type, so I always start with rest. It's also my favorite scripture, come to me, all you who are tired and weary, and I will give you rest. And that is a place most of the couples are not hitting or getting enough of when they come my way. And it's almost like when we were babies and we're crying and needing a nap, when they come to me and they don't have a charge on their cell phone, so to speak, their own life. We always think of smartphones. It's like, you don't pull out the biggest apps. You don't start fighting. So I invite them first to a place of rest together. You even heard me say to my husband, we take that 5 minutes of rest before we do any processing. And it's just so healing because we're part of a culture that has a 3-second, and we're all 7s in that way now. We all have a short attention span. So to just invite ourselves into deep breaths, pauses, and rest before we do the work is really healing. So we start there, and we usually land with some fun at the end. After all the hard work, just say, like, are you getting 6 to 10 hours of quality time in your week out of 115 waking hours? If you're not, it's going to be exhausting to do any other kind of work. So those 2 are beginning and end caps of all the work I try to do.
I love working with any therapist that reminds me I need to sleep more. It's something I'm very good at. I score well on the sleep factor. I'm an 8-hour-a-night guy, pretty religiously. All right, everybody. We're talking with Crista Hardin, The Enneagram in Marriage. Your guide to thriving together in your unique pairing is her marvelous book. And I want to remind you about her podcast, The Enneagram in Marriage. And Crista, what else do you want people to know about?
I'm thankful they're here with us, and just keep on shining in your marriage or your relationship. If you don't have one yet, understand you can be awesome single too. Just here to help you with any of that.
Awesome. Anthony, I've had a ball as always, my friend.
It's been good.
It's been good. And listen up, Typology Tribe. May you have love. May you have joy. May you have peace. May you have healing. May you have rest. And in the words of the great Oscar Wilde, be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. Until next time.